on, everyone. Let's just make sure we are live. Let's make sure our destinations are live. Yes, we are. All right. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. I hope y'all are doing well. Listen, it's a good day. And there's so much for us to talk about today. I'm excited to be here with you all. And I just wanted to say that don't let today's circumstances tell you what your future looks like. And that is the lane that we're going into. I'm just going to jump right in. We are talking about grief, Black women, and Tyler Perry and his comments. I think that it needs to be addressed from a healthy perspective. And I've been seeing a lot of commentary, and a lot of things that I've been seeing haven't been in alignment with the healthy patterns that we need to be using in order for us to move forward and to get ahead. So I want to start by saying this, that we should acknowledge the fact that Black women have had a very difficult time in the history of creation. We Black women have had to endure or what is called rape culture. And it's not just a raping of the body, but also of the mind, the spirit, the intellect, the emotions, the characteristics, and the shaping of the identity. And what happens when something is raped? Means that something is stolen from it against its will, or something is imparted into it against its will. But these things typically happen simultaneously. And so, what we have seen in the history of Black women is this rape culture where there's been a impartation happening into our spirit, our soul, our mind, and also in taking away from the identity and the construct and the defining of who God created the woman to be. Okay. So I needed to lay that foundation so you can understand that when there is a culture that is raped generationally and systematically, that means that it happens time after time after time, which time after time meaning you and your daughter and your granddaughter, your great granddaughter, your great granddaughter. When this happens culturally, generationally, but also systematically, meaning it is happening in the area of hierarchy, it's happening in the area of in the political area and the governmental area. It's happening in the family. It's happening in education. This means it's happening within the systems of development, right? From a very young age, there is a construct of anger that manifests from that exchange, okay? And so when we think about anger, we have to understand that when people struggle with anger, it is typically for two reasons: sorrow and sadness, or a feeling of not being heard. And I want to be clear about this because a lot of times a person that's struggling with anger is heard. They just feel like they're not heard because of the amount of sorrow and sadness that they're carrying. And so when they get ready to speak, they cannot adequately express what they're dealing with. And so when it comes across, they perceive that the person can't receive them, when that's not the case. The case is that because there's so much broken areas and there is so many fragments, it is a perception that you are not being heard when you actually are. And I will say that even if we look at and we'll go into some of what Tyler Perry said, when we look at Black women being more educated, being accolade driven, being having a lot more, making a lot more money now, and financially stable than in the history of time, we will see that in a way there is a healing that's happening in an area of suppression that has been there. But because, and there are a lot of conversations that are happening for Black women and the advancement in this area, but because there is a perception that Black women are not being heard, there's a perception that we're not being understood, there's still an anger that is there. And I believe this is the anger that's surfacing from Tyler Perry's comments. So I'm going to say, what he said. I didn't watch the entire thing, but the clip that people have gotten hung up on, I want to address it because we've got to deal with this area of grief in the mindset and the heart and then the understanding that Black women carry today that hinders us from hearing what he's saying, and that also there's a blockage in the area of love, right? So what I heard him say was that today Black women are more successful, are more financially stable, are making a lot more money. And in this area, if you are to come across a man who doesn't make as much as you, but he loves you and he cares about you and he can take care of you and help you around the home, that is okay. And what I've seen a lot of people say is that, and a lot of Black women say that Tyler Perry is telling you to settle. And I didn't hear that. I didn't hear him say settle and accept something less than what you feel you should have. I didn't hear him say settle and say that this situation is okay. I didn't hear him say settle and don't look forward to things getting better. I heard him say that if you find yourself in this situation where you're being loved and your needs are being tended to and you're being cared for, but that financial security that you think you're supposed to have is not equal, it's okay to receive that because that is love. And what I feel the disconnect is that because Black women have had to work harder to be accepted in many different areas in life, it came across as though it was mocking and in this area. And I'll get into the mocking a little bit later, but I wanted to address what I heard. And I'm going to tell you, there was a season where my husband got injured. He couldn't work. They even said he wouldn't be able to walk, right? And God favored me and blessed me through my education, through my background, through my experience to step into a role in a position that I really didn't even consider myself qualified for. Several positions that allowed me to financially support my home. And in fact, the last four children of that I have never been to daycare. They've not had to go to daycare. My third and fourth sons were able to stay home with their father while I went to work for a season. This was okay. And never did I wake up and was I upset that I was making more money or that I had this and he didn't have that. And when he could go out, he went out and hustled and did what he could. And he went to school and got educated. And then there was an exchange where God put him into a position that could support our home and brought me home. And I've been home since. And so I want to share that in that exchange, it wasn't something permanent. It was something that had to happen for a brief moment. And that was okay. And we as Black women have to understand that it is not always about being financially secured and taken care of. That is the only thing that matters. But what I feel like God is trying to do is heal our hearts so that we can receive love. We can receive love. Now, let me be clear. I don't necessarily agree with everything Tyler Perry says or does. I really do not watch Medea content anymore. I have a very, very strong disdain now for men, especially Black men, acting like Black women and doing this thing. I just don't agree with it anymore. And there was a time in my life when I was younger that I would laugh at Medea, but I feel like it's disheartening that we can, and this is what we do in the Black community. We provide comedic relief. We laugh at our own pain and our trauma as a method of getting by, but there's no real healing in that. And so to see that a Black man can take that experience of this angry Black bitter woman full of trauma and scorn and we laugh at it, but if we saw a woman like that today, we would chastise her, we will ostracize her, we will cast her to the side and tell her, hey, you need to go sit down and heal. So there is a problem that we can portray it one way but we can't receive it in another. So I don't agree with everything he says or everything he does. Okay, do not. However, I do understand in that moment what he was trying to get across. And I believe that only when we can move forward, and moving forward means we have to be acknowledged in what was and what is. Because a lot of times we tell each other that, you know, listen, that was so far behind you, you need to let that go. Letting it go and releasing to me are two different things. Letting something go means I drop it. Releasing it means that it's no longer a part of my paradigm, no longer a part of my understanding. I'm not harboring it. Release is forgiveness. Letting it go is when you just say, you know what, I'm not going to think about that anymore. But releasing something is when you forgive, and that is the form of grief that I want to get into. I want to share this because the one thing I was thinking on before I came on here is, what do Black women need to grieve in order for us to be able to see ourselves differently? To be able to see, because I'm going to be clear with you that we have to compete with everybody. We have to compete with every race and every gender, and we even compete with each other. We have to compete in the area of colorism with one another. It is crazy. But I want to put these definitions of ideologies up here because we've got to grieve. We as Black women have to grieve our own ideologies. Ideologies are a manner of content, of thinking, characteristics of an individual, group, of culture. That means there is a characteristic, there is something internally inside of us, culturally, and as a group of women that we have inherited, that in a form of mannerism that we have to release. We have to release. We have to release. And this release does not mean that we're not heard. This release does not mean that we're not understood. This release does not mean that we can't speak up for ourselves. It simply means that we've got to allow God into spaces in our heart that have become hardened. Spaces where we feel like we got to be more educated to get ahead because we're less. Spaces where we feel like we have to make more money because we feel like we're not enough. Spaces where we feel like we've had to get more accolades so that we can be seen. It's nothing wrong with doing these things. These are things that we need to do in order to reset what has been. But what is the drive behind it? Because the drive behind something that can make or break the sustainability of it. How long is it going to last? What concepts are in your mind? What ways are you thinking about yourself? What has your life or culture taught you about who you are? Who have you had to fight against? What are you up against? These are questions that you have to look at. And I'm not going to sit here and say that we're not going to still have to work twice as hard, because we will have to. But everything has a season, and that season is ending, where God wants to shift us into a place of getting what we are due with ease. Not that we don't have to work, but that we don't have to toil. There's a difference between working and toiling. And so this grief that God, this area of grief that God is trying to help us with, He's trying to help us see ourselves differently. He's trying to help us have these conversations from a healthy perspective. He's trying to help us shift our mind in an area that we've kind of been stale or stagnant. He's trying to help us see that, listen, I know that you've had to fight them. I know that you had to go against them. I know that things have been stolen from you. I know that things have been stripped from you. I know that things have been imparted into you. I know that you have lost out in areas that you thought life was supposed to grant you. I know that life has been harder for you. I know that this happened to you, your mother, your grandmother, your great grandmother, your great great grandmother. Systemically and generationally, this is happening to you over and over again. But it is time that I need you, my daughter of color, to release to me those things so that I can show you who I have designed you to be in healthy form. That when you go out and you get educated, it's not so that you can say, I'm sticking it to the man. That when you go out and you get your accolades, it's not so that you can say, oh, you see me, that I'm successful. That when you go out and you are making more money than you ever made, it's not because you are playing catch up or mirroring yourself to somebody else. It's because God says, I want you to have those things because I love you. Not I want you to go get those things and grind for those things to show them who you are. Because it is not about how they see you, it's about how I see you. It's not about what they spoke over you, it's about what I spoke over you. It is about you grieving the pain that people have inflicted on you and imparted into your bloodline, imparted into your. Yesterday, we talked about when God was saying to Jeremiah, before I formed you, I knew you. God was saying that He had a relationship with you, a covenant with you before you were raped, before you were abused, before you were molested, before you lost your job, before you were beaten, before you were ostracized, before they classified you by color, before they told you you couldn't amount to anything, before you had to toil for it. All of this, before all of this, there was a relationship with you and God. Before you met the wrong people, before you entered into the wrong friendships, before the wrong relationships came in and stole and robbed you of your joy, before iniquity was presented to you, there was a relationship with you and God. And He said, I set you apart. And a lot of the pain that you are going through is for the purpose that God wants you. But that's not what this is about. This is about you grieving the ideologies. Let's put it back up here. This is about you grieving the ideologies of what the culture has spoken to you and why we have such a hard time with anger as Black women, because it's not that you're not being heard. It's just you need to change your perspective about how people are hearing you. People, I'm telling you, Black women, people are hearing you. People know your pain. People are waking up. You are successful because people are waking up. You are educated because people are waking up. You are financially stable because people are waking up. People are giving things to you because God has opened up doors of favor and says it is time for the area in your life that has been held back to release. So people are hearing you. But you've got to change your perspective about the conversations you're having with yourself about the ideologies that have been placed on you, so you can see that the conversations that are happening are for your benefit and they're for your good. Grieve those things that made you feel like you were low, because I'm telling you, you are no longer low. Black woman, I'm talking to Black women. You are no longer low. You are no longer beneath. You are no longer behind. You are no longer the tail. You are where God has always sanctioned you to be, but you've got to see it about yourself, and you've got to release the anger of the childhood dream that you thought it was supposed to be this way. Every bump and every roadblock and every tear and every detour was all for your good. It was only because of those things that you were able to get to where you are now. So grieve the situations that happened, the people that violated you, the people that poured into you, the thing that you thought that was not supposed to be there. Grieve those things so that you can see that the conversations happening now are for your benefit. They're for your good. God wants you to enter into a space of love. Grief is about the release. Remember, we said the hardest part about grief is the release, but God wants you to enter into a space of love. And it's not a space of competing with men. It's not a space of competing with race. It's not a space of competing with even colorism. My God, if we can get past this colorism and you can see you, that you are beautiful, that you are chosen, and that grief and sorrow does not get to follow you anymore. This is the last bit of it. Flush it out. Flush it out so that you can move on into that place that God has for you. So I really wanted to hit Tyler Perry's points. I wanted to talk about this from a vein that I believe God needs us to have this conversation, and we'll be having many more. I do not want to take away from the Black person or the Black woman's experience, because we've got to acknowledge where we were and what we've gone through in order for us to have the conversation about where we are and how to get ahead. And these are important things that we must continue to discuss so that we can see that the narrative is shifting and that is changing, and the perspective is no longer what we thought, but it is only only what God has spoken about who we are. If you have made it this far and you catch the replay, I really want you to check out this ebook that I wrote, Agape Mending of a Broken Heart. It taps into this area of grief. It taps into this area of release. It taps into this area of forgiveness. It taps into the fractured area in our heart that allow us to remain stuck and not fully embrace the full magnitude of what God wants us to do and how he wants us to see ourselves. And when we're able to really flush into that area, man, we're going to see something massive. We're going to see massive healing happening on a level that we have never seen, because there is a culture of women. There is a culture of brown women that will change the game when we come into the field, on the field healed. We will change the game when we come onto the field healed, not come onto the field competing, not come onto the field comparing. We are entering into the field healed, my God. So I want you to get this. It will change your understanding. It will change your life. It will help you open up a new dimension in the sphere of your mind. God wants to penetrate your mind. He wants to penetrate your heart, and he's trying to break through, and he will break through. So I want you to check this out. Y'all have an amazing Friday. Make sure you get it. It will appear after the live is over, but you can go to payhip.com/Melisha and it is there. Love you all. It was great talking to you, and I will see you all